Welcome to another episode of All Talk, and today of all days, I am driving my new BMW E36 328i Sport. Before I do a first drive, let's show you around the car. I've gone and done it. I've gone and bought another retro BMW. This time another E36 platform, the same as the Z3, but really, actually, this is a daddy, because this is the one that the Z3 was based on, and this is a car for me to have out of all of the E36s. The 328i Sport is a perfect balance of everything within that range. First thoughts whilst I drive this car, well, you know something, jumping into this already, it doesn't feel like it's 22 years of age. When you drive this car, it feels actually really quite modern. There's not a lot of noise, there's not really much in the way of creaking going on, and the car itself feels pretty solid on the road so far, although I've only driven a few hundred yards. There's a couple of issues that I can tell already. There's a slightly squeaky pulley from somewhere up front, and the car is pulling a little bit to the right. But this car's been stood for quite a while, so it could well be the case that the tyres are actually on their way out. That's something we'll have a look at once we've got time to get this up on the ramps. We'll have a look at all the suspension components as well. This car is sitting on a set of original genuine Alpina alloys, and I believe that they are absolutely correct for the E36. Right, here we go, let's give it a bit of... That engine pulls really well. Oh, look how smooth that is. And we're already moving along quite nicely. It's still a nippy car. By modern standards, it's not quick, of course, but it's fast enough. It's fast enough to get you into trouble still. This car has got the M52 engine, which is the same engine as is in my Project Z3. It's a 2.8 M52B 28 engine, B standing for benzene, I believe, which is the German word for petrol. 28 obviously being the displacement of the engine. It's a 2.8 litre, and 52 being the series. As you already know my thoughts on this engine, I won't harp on too much about them. However, for me, it's an absolute gem out of BMW's range in the 1990s. It's silky smooth, and actually this example is even smoother than the one in my Z3 so far. It feels incredibly responsive and feels absolutely on the money. It doesn't feel like it's aged. When you put your foot down in this and the Vanos kicks in, you've still got plenty of pull. You can hustle these along really quite nicely, and I've seen a few reviews that say that actually these are not really a quick car, and okay, they're not. They're 193 horsepower, but actually on a decent little B road, you can really still hustle these quite nicely. They're not as fast as something like a Clio 182. Obviously, this car weighs about 1,395 kilos. A Clio weighs 1,080 kilos. This car is an individual spec car, so it's finished in Meergrün metallic. Apologies to my German subscribers for that ridiculously shoddy pronunciation. However, that is called sea green, I believe, in the UK. It may well be called sea foam if you're in the US, I think. It's complemented here with a tan leather interior, and I think that colour combination is fantastic. The E36 shape is great in a subdued tone. I think it doesn't need to be overly garish as much as I really do like the Dakar yellow. The tan combination with the green is classic. This colour is slightly more understated than the Boston green that we had on the channel a few months ago that Usher bought, the Budget 328i. This is not going to go the route that the previous one didn't get sold. This one is going to be a keeper, and gradually we're going to use this, but we are going to restore it a little bit more, although it's quite usable to start with. Despite the fact that the roads are, let's get this windscreen cleared for you, despite the fact that these roads are slippy and quite treacherous today. That doesn't take away from the driver enjoyment. If you're used to rear-wheel drive cars and you've got a bit of experience, you can actually still drive this perfectly safely. Of course, the ASC, the anti-slip control that is BMW's basic traction control in this car, is not really going to get you massively out of trouble if you get yourself into it. But unless you're driving like an absolute lunatic, actually, you know, the car will be perfectly fine. One thing that I have noticed already that's a problem on this car, and this is obviously partially a let's try and figure out what's wrong with Dan's E36 328i Sport video. However, the gear linkage, and this is a common problem, the gear linkage and the bushers and the spacers are worn on this car. So when you try and change from second gear into third, quite often you are hitting fifth. It's not really returning back to where it should be. We've got a little bit of that squeaky fan noise going on. Hopefully that doesn't detract too much from this video. Behind the wheel of this BMW 328i, it's a beautiful place to be. It's absolutely gorgeous. You can use this quite easily as a daily driver. It still is actually a really comfortable environment in which to drive. Everything is at your fingertips. The steering feel is great, the brakes are good, and the handling is actually incredibly good for a 22-year-old coupe. It's a fantastic driver's car in lots of ways. Of course, obviously these things can be absolutely thrown around on the absolute edge as well, and that's really why you buy one of these in many ways, is to drive them and drive them quite hard. Let's have a little drive down these back roads. Broke traction quite easily there, don't know if you saw that. It's very wet, controllable, but still you have to be quick on that steering wheel and keep the throttle planted, otherwise it will catch you out. Inside the car, it's just a really nice place to be. We've got the tan interior, a sort of tan dash with a black console here, which is really deep and dark still. It's not really aged. We've got this 3-spoke BMW M Sport steering wheel. We've got a onboard BMW computer, despite being 22 years old, so that's pretty nice. We've got what we've got. We've got consumption. We've got range, 242 miles. The seats are incredibly comfortable, quite frankly. They're firm, but they've aged really well actually. Plenty of padding there for my ample buttocks to settle in. Like me and you watch a little bit of YouTube, you will see people comparing the E30, the E36 and the E46 in particular, and sometimes the E36 seems to get a little bit of a bad press, and I think that's incredibly unfair. People say, well, the E46 is such a big jump, it's a better driving dynamic than the E36, and it is. Ultimately, if you're looking for outright performance, it's a better car. It drives faster, it handles better, it's more communicative. People say the E30 is a classic, and you know, it's the one to have. It's the M3 in particular is a really desirable car, and I agree again, it is, it's a great car. But to downplay the E36 for me is making a serious mistake, because the E36 is a really good looking car and it's still fast. It is a big step up in performance from the E30. There's a big jump there, and yes, it's not quite as slick as an E46, but it's a retro looking car. An E46 is a curvy, relatively modern looking car. I don't want to drive that. So why did I buy an E36? Well, quite frankly, I still think it's the best coupe, as an all-round coupe from the 1990s. I think it's the best looking, I think it's got the best engine, I think it's the most luxurious in a way whilst still being sporty, and BMW managed to get the handling and ride comfort pretty much on the money with this car. Obviously, a lot of the times when you make a car a little bit on the sporty side, you lose quite a lot of ride comfort, and that's not the case with the 328i Sport, despite the fact it has a slightly sportier suspension pack. it still drives really well, and although you can feel a little bit of age in this car's bushes, etc., and suspension components, which we will address, it doesn't take away from the fact that this is still a very nice place to be. BMW in the 1990s, I think, was at its best in terms of everything, quite frankly, in terms of the driver focus of the car, certainly, in terms of the quality of the materials and the manufacturing processes, in terms of the styling and the looks. And again, I think when you look at modern BMWs, actually, I think that BMW has very much lost its way. Yes, okay, the M4, the M5, they're fantastic cars in their own right in many ways, but they're just not really usable in the same way on British roads. You can jump into an E36 like this, go and drive it and enjoy it and use it, and actually the engagement value from this car on most British roads is definitely better than a lot of the modern BMWs. 1990s was just the best era for cars for me. It's an era where technological advancement had got to the stage where the cars were reliable-ish most of the time, and they were very usable, they were nice to drive, and they were still engaging, and they weren't the same kind of oversized heavyweight monsters with loads of nonsense in them that you just don't need anymore, and they were still relatively basic. BMW in particular had a bit of a habit of that. If you wanted to buy a car, you used to have to spec a stereo in it sometimes, and spec a heater, spec a steering wheel. A steering wheel was an optional extra. I'm obviously joking, but it wasn't really far off that. You didn't get a lot for your money. But actually keeping the cars pared back is what made BMW a great driver's car. Thank you for watching this episode of All Talk. If you haven't yet subscribed, then please do so. This BMW E36 will be appearing lots of times in future episodes on this channel, and make sure that you click the bell icon so that you get up-to-date information on every single video that comes out. See you in the next one.